They begged the stars for salvation, and the stars were silent. As civilizations crumbled before the shadow plague, hope vanished into darkness. But in the forgotten edges of the galaxy, where no ambassador dared to go, something stirred. Something ancient, something human. They had vanished without a word, ghosts of a violent world. But now the galaxy needed monsters. And Earth? Earth had been listening all along. The silent watchers were awake. When civilizations fall, who do you call? Ambassador Serenity pressed her crystalline form against the viewport of her damaged scout ship, watching the last lights of Harmony Prime flicker and die. The beautiful garden world had been consumed in less than 6 hours, its billion inhabitants, reduced to biomass for the shadow plague's endless hunger. Where once stood cities of living crystal and flowing water, now only twisted metal and pulsing organic matter remained. The shadow plague was unlike anything the galaxy had ever faced. It wasn't just a weapon or an invasion force. It was evolution, weaponized, a biomechanical virus that consumed entire civilizations and incorporated their technology into its growing collective consciousness. Each world it devoured made it stronger, smarter, more adaptable. Serenity's species, the Lumens, were beings of pure energy housed in crystalline shells. They had lived for millennia in perfect harmony with nature, developing art, philosophy, and science while never once raising weapons against another living being. Like most species in the ethereal confederacy, they had evolved beyond the need for violence, creating a galactic civilization based on cooperation and mutual understanding. Now that civilization was dying, consumed world by an enemy that couldn't be reasoned with, negotiated with, or deterred, her ship's communication array crackled to life, broadcasting the final transmission from Harmony Prime's defense coordinator. The voice belonged to Counselor Wave, an ancient lumen whose crystalline form had grown dim with age and now dimmed further with despair. To any who received this message, Wave's harmonious voice carried across space. Harmony Prime has fallen. The Shadow Plague's adaptive capabilities have overwhelmed our defenses. We estimate complete consumption within the hour. The Confederacy Council must consider extreme options. The peaceful path has failed. Serenity closed her communication channel, unable to listen to her people's death cries any longer. Waves, final words echoed in her consciousness. Extreme options. The Confederacy had exhausted every conventional solution. Their combined fleets, representing 47 species and thousands of worlds, had been systematically destroyed by an enemy that learned from every encounter. The Shadow Plague absorbed not just biological matter, but technological systems, incorporating each species' innovations into its collective arsenal. Lumen energy weapons, Gorvac shield technology, Sylvani faster-than-light drives, all had been turned against their creators. The more the Confederacy fought, the stronger their enemy became. But deep in the restricted archives of the Confederacy's historical database, Serenity had discovered references to something else, something the Council had tried to forget. 43 years ago, first contact had been established with a species calling themselves humans. They came from a world designated Sol 3, later learned to be called Earth by its inhabitants. Initial cultural exchanges had been promising. The humans showed remarkable adaptability and quick learning. They seemed eager to join galactic civilization. Then everything changed. During the integration assessment, Confederacy scientists had visited Earth to evaluate human society. What they found horrified them. The planet was a death world of unimaginable violence, where natural disasters killed millions. Predators evolved specifically to hunt intelligent life, and the humans themselves had spent their entire evolutionary history in constant warfare. The assessment committee's report had been classified, but Serenity had accessed fragments through her diplomatic clearance. The humans were deemed fundamentally incompatible with civilized society due to their pathological need for conflict and violence. Earth was quarantined, and all contact was severed. The humans had protested, sending diplomatic missions that were turned away at the border. They had offered trade agreements, scientific cooperation, cultural exchange, all rejected. Eventually, They stopped trying. Their ships disappeared from Confederacy space, and the humans withdrew into the dark regions beyond charted territory. The galaxy had forgotten about them, dismissing them as another failed species unable to evolve beyond their primitive nature. But now, as the shadow plague consumed everything the Confederacy had built, Serenity wondered if humanity's primitive nature might be exactly what the galaxy needed. Her ship's navigation system displayed the coordinates she had calculated from old trade route records. Sol was 3 days away through hyperspace, assuming the routes were still accurate, and the system hadn't been consumed by the shadow plague or some other cosmic disaster. It was a desperate gamble. The humans might be extinct, or they might attack her on sight for representing the species that had rejected them. But with the Confederacy's fleets in ruins and the shadow plague advancing on their core worlds, desperate gambles were all that remained. Serenity activated her ship's faster-than-light drive and jumped toward humanity's home system, carrying with her the hopes of a dying civilization and the weight of 43 years of regret. The journey through hyperspace gave her time to study what little information remained about human society. The original assessment reports painted a picture of a species trapped in endless cycles of violence, their entire culture built around competition, conflict, and survival. Their history was written in blood, wars that lasted centuries, weapons that could destroy entire continents, conflicts fought over resources, territory, and ideology. Yet beneath the violence, there were glimpses of something else. Humans had created art of breathtaking beauty, literature that explored the deepest questions of existence, and scientific innovations that bordered on genius. They had overcome their own nature enough to achieve space travel and develop technologies that impressed even Confederacy scientists. Perhaps most relevant to her current mission, humans had developed military doctrine unlike anything seen in the galaxy. Where Confederacy forces relied on overwhelming technological superiority and defensive formations, humans had mastered asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics, and what their strategists called total war, the complete dedication of an entire society to achieving military victory. As her ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, Serenity's sensors immediately detected something that made her crystalline form pulse with surprise. The system was alive with activity, ship movements, communication signals, and energy signatures that suggested a thriving industrial civilization. But something was wrong with the readings. Her sensors were detecting far more activity than should be possible for a single star system, and the technological signatures were unlike anything in Confederacy databases. The humans hadn't just survived their quarantine, they had been busy. A communication signal locked onto her ship with startling speed and precision. A human voice, speaking accented Galactic standard, filled her cockpit. "Unknown vessel, this is Sol Defense Command. You are entering restricted space. State your identity and purpose immediately." Serenity activated her own communication array, her harmonious voice carrying the formal protocols of diplomatic contact. "This is Ambassador Serenity of the Lumen Republic, representing the Ethereal Confederacy. I come seeking audience with human leadership on a matter of galactic urgency." The silence that followed stretched long enough for Serenity to wonder if her message had been received. When the human voice returned, it carried a different tone, colder, more controlled. "Ambassador Serenity, you are hereby advised that the Ethereal Confederacy severed all diplomatic relations with humanity 43 years ago. Sol space is closed to Confederacy vessels. You have 1 hour to depart this system before defensive measures are activated." Despite the rejection, Serenity felt a surge of hope. The humans were not only alive but organized enough to maintain border security and remember old grievances. More importantly, they were talking instead of shooting, which suggested they retained some capacity for diplomacy. "Please," she transmitted, allowing desperate urgency to color her harmonious voice. "The Confederacy is dying. A threat unlike anything we've ever faced is consuming our worlds one by one. We have exhausted all conventional solutions. We need help." Another long silence, then, "Stand by for escort. Any deviation from assigned flight path will be considered a hostile act." 3 ships materialized around Serenity's scout vessel, with technology that made her sensors scream impossibly advanced readings. They weren't just cloaked. They had been completely undetectable until they chose to reveal themselves. The vessels were sleek and angular, their hulls showing no external weapons or obvious technological features, yet they radiated an aura of barely contained lethality. As they escorted her deeper into the Sol system, Serenity's instruments detected increasingly impossible readings. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter had been transformed into a massive industrial complex, with mining operations and construction, facilities on a scale that dwarfed anything in Confederacy space. Orbital platforms surrounded Earth, their purposes unclear but their scope enormous. Most disturbing of all, her long-range sensors were detecting movement throughout the outer system. Ships, stations, and structures that suggested human civilization had expanded far beyond their home world. The readings indicated not just growth, but military preparation on an unprecedented scale. Her escort brought her to a space station orbiting Earth's moon, a structure so large it showed up on gravitational sensors. As her ship was guided into a docking bay, Serenity caught glimpses through the viewports of what lay inside. Rows upon rows of what could only be warships, their designs unlike anything in Confederacy databases, but unmistakably built for combat. The docking procedure completed in perfect silence, and Serenity found herself facing an airlock that would either lead to salvation for her people or confirmation that the galaxy's last hope had been a fool's dream. The airlock opened, and Admiral Sarah Chen stepped through. She was a compact woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. Her uniform was simple gray fabric with minimal decoration, but she carried herself with the unmistakable bearing of someone accustomed to command. Behind Admiral Chen stood Dr. Marcus Webb, a tall man with gentle features that somehow failed to hide the sharp intelligence in his gaze. He carried a datapad and studied Serenity with the focused attention of a scientist encountering a fascinating specimen. "Ambassador Serenity," Admiral Chen said, her voice carrying the same controlled tone from the communication. "Welcome to Luna Station. I am Admiral Sarah Chen, Commanding Officer of Sol Defense Command. This is Dr. Marcus Webb, our Chief of Xenobiological Studies." Serenity allowed her crystalline form to shift into the most respectful configuration her people used for formal diplomatic encounters. "Admiral Chen, Dr. Webb, I thank you for granting me audience despite our people's complicated history. I come bearing desperate news that affects not just the Confederacy, but potentially all life in the galaxy." Dr. Webb stepped forward, his scientific curiosity apparently overriding diplomatic protocol. "Forgive my directness, Ambassador, but we've been monitoring Confederacy communications for several years. We're aware of what you call the Shadow Plague. What we don't understand is why you've come to us." The question hit Serenity like a physical blow. How could she explain that the galaxy's peaceful civilizations had spent 43 years dismissing humanity as primitive savages, only to come crawling back when their civilized solutions proved inadequate? "Because," she said quietly, "we have tried everything else and we are losing. The Shadow Plague adapts to every weapon we deploy, learns from every tactic we employ, grows stronger with every world it consumes. Our military advisors believe conventional warfare is insufficient against this threat." Admiral Chen's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture. "And what makes you think humanity has anything to offer?" Serenity's crystalline form pulsed with the colors of desperation and hope. "Because 43 years ago, the Confederacy rejected humanity for being too violent, too warlike, too primitive. Today, I'm hoping those assessments were correct." For the first time, Admiral Chen smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Dr. Webb," she said without taking her eyes off Serenity, "I think it's time we showed our guest what humanity has been doing during our 43 years of isolation." "Admiral," Dr. Webb replied, "are you certain? Full disclosure protocols?" Chen nodded. "The Shadow Plague represents an existential threat to all sapient life. If the Confederacy falls, we'll be facing them alone anyway. Better to face them with whatever allies we can find." She turned to Serenity, and the crystalline ambassador felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. Ambassador, you came here seeking help from the species your people deemed too dangerous for civilized society. Before we proceed, I want you to understand something. You weren't wrong about us. We are dangerous. The question is whether you're prepared to ally, with monsters to fight a greater monster. As they walked through the corridors of Luna Station, Serenity began to understand the true scope of her gamble. The humans hadn't just survived their rejection, they had used it as motivation to become something the galaxy had never imagined. The question was whether that something could save them all, or whether she had just awakened a force that would prove as dangerous as the enemy they faced. The galaxy was about to discover why humanity had gone silent, and why that silence had been the most terrifying sound in the universe. Earth's secret war machine awakens Admiral Chen, led Ambassador Serenity through corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly through Luna Station's interior. The walls displayed tactical readouts, fleet positions, and sensor data from across the galaxy, information that should have been impossible for an isolated species to possess. Admiral, Serenity said, her crystalline voice carrying harmonics of confusion. These displays show real-time data from Confederacy space. How are you monitoring our communications? Dr. Webb answered before Chen could respond. Ambassador, did you really think a species capable of developing faster than light travel would simply vanish when diplomatic relations were severed? We've been watching, listening, and learning for 4 decades. They entered a vast observation deck that looked out over Luna Station's primary docking bays. Serenity's energy form flared with shock at what she saw. Hundreds of ships filled the massive space, not the elegant curved vessels favored by Confederacy designers, but angular, aggressive craft that radiated purpose and barely contained violence. This is impossible, she whispered. Your civilization was confined to a single star system. The Confederacy surveys showed limited industrial capacity, primitive manufacturing. The Confederacy surveys showed what we wanted them to show, Admiral Chen interrupted. Humanity learned a valuable lesson during first contact. Never reveal your true capabilities to potential enemies. Dr. Webb activated a holographic display that filled the observation deck with tactical information. When the Confederacy rejected us, we faced a choice. We could accept isolation and gradually fade into irrelevance, or we could use that isolation to prepare for the day when the galaxy would need what we had to offer. The hologram displayed the Sol system, but not as Serenity had seen it in any Confederacy database. Asteroid mines and orbital shipyards surrounded every planet. Massive defense platforms hung in space like mechanical moons. Industrial complexes on Mars and the outer worlds produced technology that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. We've been building this for 43 years, Chen said quietly. Every rejection from the Confederacy, every dismissal of human barbarism, every declaration that we were too violent for civilized society, it all went into this. Serenity studied the holographic data, her analytical mind struggling to process the implications. Admiral, this industrial capacity exceeds anything in Confederacy space. How did you develop such technology while isolated? Necessity, Dr. Webb replied. And human nature. You see, Ambassador, while the Confederacy spent centuries perfecting cooperation and eliminating conflict, humanity spent millennia perfecting conflict itself. Every war we fought, every weapon we developed, every tactical innovation, all of it contributed to our understanding of violence as a fundamental force in the universe. The hologram shifted to show ship designs that looked nothing like the elegant vessels Serenity was familiar with. These craft were built for war, heavy armor, redundant systems, weapon mounts that prioritized firepower over aesthetics. But surely, Serenity said, technological advancement requires the peaceful cooperation that Confederacy species have mastered. How can a single species develop such innovations alone? Admiral Chen's smile was sharp as a blade. Ambassador, you're thinking like a peaceful species. You assume advancement comes through cooperation and shared knowledge. Humans learned advancement through competition and necessity. When survival depends on being better than your enemy, innovation becomes a matter of life and death. Dr. Webb called up new displays showing human technological developments. 43 years of isolation gave us something the Confederacy lacks: focused purpose. Every human knew that someday something would threaten our survival. So we prepared. The real displays showed weapons technology that made Serenity's crystalline form dim with apprehension. Kinetic bombardment systems that could crack planets. Energy weapons that could punch through any known shielding. Most disturbing of all, something called adaptive warfare protocols that seemed designed to counter exactly the kind of evolving threat the Shadow Plague represented. "You've been preparing to fight the Shadow Plague specifically?" Serenity asked. "We've been preparing to fight anything," Chen replied. "The Shadow Plague is just the first threat to emerge from dark space. Our long-range sensors detect movement in 17 different sectors beyond charted territory. The galaxy is not the peaceful place the Confederacy believes it to be." The observation deck suddenly filled with new displays as alarm signals echoed through the station. Dr. Webb's calm expression shifted to focused urgency as he processed incoming data. "Admiral, we're receiving emergency transmissions from Confederacy space. The Shadow Plague has accelerated its advance. Luminos sector is under attack." Serenity's energy form blazed with panic. Luminos sector contained her homeworld and the core of Lumen civilization. "Admiral, that's 12 billion of my people. If Luminos falls, the Shadow Plague gains access to Lumen energy manipulation technology," Chen finished, "which would make them exponentially more dangerous." "Dr. Webb, what's our current fleet status?" "Primary battle group is at full readiness. Secondary and tertiary groups can be deployed within 6 hours. But Admiral, engaging the Shadow Plague directly would expose our capabilities to the entire galaxy." Chen was quiet for a long moment, studying the tactical displays. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of momentous decision. 43 years ago, the galaxy decided humanity was too dangerous to be trusted with peaceful cooperation. They were right. We are dangerous. The question is whether we're dangerous enough. She turned to Serenity, and the crystalline ambassador saw something in the human's eyes that made her understand why her people had been so frightened of this species. Not cruelty or malice, but absolute unwavering determination. "Ambassador, I'm going to make you an offer. Humanity will engage the Shadow Plague and attempt to save your people. In return, you will observe human military doctrine and report your findings to the Confederacy Council. You will tell them exactly what kind of allies they're considering." "Admiral, I accept immediately." "Don't accept immediately," Chen interrupted sharply. "Think about what you're agreeing to. You're about to see humans fight a war the way humans fight wars. Total commitment, maximum violence, no mercy for enemies and acceptable losses for allies. Your peaceful people may find our methods more disturbing than the threat we're fighting." Dr. Webb had been monitoring communications from Confederacy space. "Admiral, the Shadow Plague has breached Luminos sector's primary defenses. Estimated time to homeworld consumption, 18 hours. Chen activated her command communicator. "All section chiefs, prepare for Operation Silence Break. Activate full fleet deployment protocols." This is not a drill. The transformation of Luna Station was immediate and breathtaking. Corridors that had seemed spacious suddenly filled with personnel moving with military precision. Displays throughout the station shifted from peaceful monitoring to active combat coordination. The gentle hum of normal operations became the purposeful symphony of a war machine activating. "Ambassador," Dr. Webb said, "I recommend you accompany me to the primary command center. What you're about to witness will determine whether the Confederacy and humanity can coexist in the post-war galaxy." As they moved through the station, Serenity began to understand the true scope of human preparation. This wasn't just a space station. It was a command center for military operations spanning light years. Every human they passed moved with the confidence of someone who had trained their entire life for this moment. The primary command center was a vast chamber filled with holographic displays and communication arrays. Officers sat at workstations that monitored everything from individual ship status to galactic-scale strategic movements. At the center of it all, Admiral Chen stood before a tactical display showing the entire known galaxy. Fleet deployment. Commencing, reported a communications officer. Stealth squadrons are moving to intercept vectors. Heavy battle groups are forming up at rally points. Long-range reconnaissance is en route to Shadow Plague territory. Serenity watched the display in amazement as ships began appearing throughout human space. Not dozens or hundreds, but thousands. Vessels emerged from hidden bases, asteroid facilities, and deep space stations that had been invisible to all galactic sensors. "Admiral," she whispered, "how many ships do you have?" "Enough," Chen replied simply. Dr. Webb provided more specific data. Current deployment involves approximately 4,000 vessels across 17 different ship classes. This represents roughly 60% of our total naval capacity. 4,000 ships. The entire Confederacy's combined fleet, before the Shadow Plague attacks, had numbered fewer than 2,000 vessels. Humanity had been building in secret for 4 decades, and they had created a military force that dwarfed anything in known space. "But Admiral," Serenity said, "such a fleet requires enormous resources, massive industrial capacity. How did you accomplish this without detection?" "By being exactly what the Confederacy accused us of being," Chen answered. "Warlike, aggressive, and prepared for violence. While your people spent 40 years refining art and philosophy, we spent 40 years refining the tools of war." The tactical display suddenly shifted to show Shadow Plague movements in real time. The biomechanical entities were advancing through Lumino's sector with terrifying efficiency, consuming Lumen defensive installations and incorporating their technology into their growing collective. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving updated intelligence from reconnaissance drones. The Shadow Plague has developed energy-draining capabilities specifically adapted to counter Lumen defensive systems." Serenity felt despair wash through her crystalline form. "They're learning from every encounter, becoming stronger with each victory. How can any military force counter an enemy that adapts to every tactic?" Dr. Webb smiled, and Serenity realized she was about to learn why humans had spent so long preparing for this exact scenario. "Ambassador, the Shadow Plague's greatest strength is also its greatest weakness. It learns from encounters and adapts accordingly. But human military doctrine is based on a simple principle: never fight the same battle twice." Admiral Chen activated the primary communications array, her voice carrying to every ship in the human fleet. "All vessels, this is Admiral Chen. Today we end our 43 years of silence. The galaxy will learn why humanity withdrew, why we prepared, and why isolation made us stronger. You know your missions, you know the stakes. Show the universe what Deathworlders can do when the survival of innocent life is at stake." The response from 4,000 ships was immediate and synchronized. "Understood, Admiral. Humanity endures." As the first human ships jumped to hyperspace, beginning their journey to save a civilization that had once rejected them, Serenity realized that her desperate gamble had succeeded beyond her wildest hopes. But as she watched the cold efficiency with which humanity prepared for total war, she began to wonder whether she had saved the galaxy or doomed it to a different kind of conquest. The Shadow Plague was about to learn why Earth's children had gone silent, and the galaxy was about to discover whether the cure for cosmic horror was worse than the disease itself. When Deathworlders hunt, the human fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Lumino's sector like a storm of vengeance made manifest. 4,000 ships materialized simultaneously, their arrival timed with precision that spoke of decades of military planning. Ambassador Serenity watched from the command center of the flagship Retribution as Admiral Chen's forces deployed in formations that existed nowhere in Confederacy tactical doctrine. "Phase 1 deployment complete," reported Commander Torres from the tactical station. "Stealth reconnaissance confirms Shadow Plague presence on 17 worlds. Enemy adaptation patterns suggest they've integrated Lumen energy-draining technology into their collective consciousness." Admiral Chen studied the holographic display showing Shadow Plague movements. The biomechanical entities had spread through Lumino's sector like an infection, their twisted ships pulsing with absorbed energy from destroyed Lumen installations. Each consumed world made them stronger, their collective intelligence growing with every assimilated technology. Dr. Webb, Chen said. Analysis of their current capabilities? Dr. Webb's data showed alarming patterns. The Shadow Plague has not only adapted to lumen energy weapons but improved upon them. They're now capable of draining power from any energy-based system within a significant radius. Conventional Confederacy tactics would be completely ineffective. Serenity felt her crystalline form dim with despair. Admiral, if they can drain energy systems, how can any technological civilization fight them? They'll simply absorb whatever weapons we bring to bear. Admiral Chen smiled with predatory satisfaction. Ambassador, you're thinking like the Confederacy thinks. You assume technology must be energy-based, weapons must be sophisticated, tactics must be elegant. Humans learned a different approach. She activated the fleet communication system. All vessels initiate Protocol Barbarian, kinetic weapons only, analog systems where possible, and remember, they can adapt to anything they survive long enough to analyze. The transformation of the human fleet was immediate and shocking. Ships that had seemed like technological marvels suddenly revealed their true nature. External energy weapon arrays retracted, replaced by massive kinetic accelerators that launched solid projectiles at relativistic speeds. Sophisticated computer systems switched to analog backups that couldn't be hacked or drained. Kinetic bombardment? Serenity asked, her voice carrying harmonics of confusion. Admiral, such weapons are primitive compared to modern energy systems. Primitive and effective, Dr. Webb replied. The Shadow Plague can adapt to energy weapons, absorb technological systems, and learn from sophisticated tactics. But it's hard to adapt to a chunk of metal traveling at 20% of light speed, Commander Torres reported incoming sensor data. Admiral, Shadow Plague forces are responding to our arrival. They're moving to intercept with approximately 200 vessels. Composition suggests they've incorporated technology from 12 different Confederacy species. The enemy ships were nightmares of biomechanical engineering. Each vessel pulsed with organic components that had been merged with stolen technology, creating hybrids that defied classification. They moved with the fluid grace of living creatures, but carried weapons adapted from the finest Confederacy designs. They're trying to communicate, the communications officer reported. Universal translation protocols suggest they're attempting to negotiate. Admiral Chen's expression hardened. No negotiations, no quarter, no prisoners. These entities have consumed billions of innocent lives. Today that ends. The first engagement began when Shadow Plague scouts attempted to probe human defenses using energy-draining beams that had proved devastating against Confederacy forces. The beams struck human ships and simply dissipated against ablative armor, designed to shed energy rather than absorb it. Return fire, Chen commanded. All batteries. The human response was overwhelming and precise. Thousands of kinetic projectiles launched simultaneously, creating a metal storm that tore through Shadow Plague formations. The biomechanical entities tried to adapt, growing armor and developing evasive patterns. But they couldn't evolve fast, enough to counter the sheer volume of incoming fire. Target their larger vessels, Chen ordered. Focus fire on anything that looks like a command node. Serenity watched in fascination and horror as human tactics unfolded. Where Confederacy forces would have tried to disable enemy ships for study, the humans systematically destroyed everything that moved. Where peaceful species would have attempted communication, humanity offered only violence. Admiral, she said, quietly, the Confederacy Council will want to know, why are you not attempting to capture specimens for analysis? Surely understanding their technology could benefit. Ambassador, Dr. Webb interrupted. The Shadow Plague is a collective consciousness that learns from every encounter. Every ship we capture, every piece of technology we study, every communication we intercept gives them information about our capabilities. The only way to fight an adaptive enemy is to give them nothing to adapt to. The battle escalated as more Shadow Plague vessels arrived, drawn by distress signals from their dying scouts. They came in waves, each group incorporating lessons learned from previous encounters. But human doctrine had been built specifically to counter this kind of adaptive threat. Rotate attack patterns, Chen commanded. No formation longer than 30 seconds. No weapon configuration longer than 5 minutes. Keep them guessing. The human fleet flowed through space like a school of predatory fish, never maintaining the same formation twice, never using the same attack angle consecutively. Their ships were designed for this kind of warfare. Modular weapon systems that could be reconfigured rapidly, armor that shed damage rather than resisting it, and crews trained to fight in constant motion. Shadow Plague forces are attempting to withdraw to their primary hive cluster, Torres reported. Intelligence suggests they're trying to preserve their collective knowledge. Chen shook her head. Not happening. All ships pursue and destroy. We end this here and now. The human fleet split into hunter-killer groups, each one pursuing fleeing Shadow Plague vessels with relentless efficiency. There would be no retreat, no regrouping, no opportunity for the collective consciousness to analyze human tactics and develop countermeasures. Admiral, Serenity said, her crystalline voice carrying new harmonics of understanding and fear. Your people fight like the Shadow Plague itself, with total commitment to victory. There's a difference, Dr. Webb replied. The Shadow Plague fights to consume and grow. Humans fight to protect and preserve. The methods may seem similar, but the purpose defines everything. As the battle progressed, Serenity began to understand the true scope of human military philosophy. This wasn't just superior technology or better tactics. It was a completely different approach to warfare. Where Confederacy species sought to minimize conflict, humans had embraced it as a fundamental aspect of existence. Phase 2 commencing, Chen announced. Planetary assault teams begin surface operations. On the holographic display, Serenity watched human forces descend toward Shadow Plague-infected worlds. Instead of the careful, methodical approaches favored by Confederacy military doctrine, human troops deployed with overwhelming speed and violence. They're not trying to retake the worlds, she observed. They're sterilizing them. Correct, Chen replied. The Shadow Plague spreads through infected biomass and stolen technology. The only way to stop it completely is to deny it any resources to consume or adapt. Serenity watched as human weapons turned infected worlds into barren rock. It was brutal, efficient, and absolutely necessary. But it went against everything the Confederacy believed about the sanctity of life and the preservation of civilization. Admiral, the Confederacy Council will struggle to accept these methods. We believe in redemption and healing and finding peaceful solutions, even to the most difficult problems. Admiral Chen turned to face her directly. Ambassador, look at your homeworld. The display shifted to show Luminous Prime, Serenity's own world. The Shadow Plague had reached the planetary surface, their biomechanical infections spreading across the crystalline cities like cancer. Billions of lumen energy beings were being systematically harvested, their life force feeding the collective's endless hunger. Your peaceful solutions have cost billions of lives, Chen said quietly. Your reluctance to embrace necessary violence has allowed this plague to spread unchecked. How many more worlds will die while the Confederacy debates the morality of decisive action? The brutal truth of those words hit Serenity like a physical blow. While the Confederacy had spent months trying to negotiate, research, and find elegant solutions, the Shadow Plague had consumed world after world. Human brutality was saving lives that Confederacy compassion had failed to protect. Signal from the surface teams, Torres reported. Primary hive clusters have been located and marked for orbital bombardment. Requesting permission to commence. Planet killer protocols. Serenity's energy form flared with panic. Planet killer protocols? Admiral, you can't destroy entire worlds. We can, and we will, Chen replied. The Shadow Plague has turned these worlds into weapons against the galaxy. They cannot be allowed to survive. Dr. Webb activated tactical displays showing the infected worlds. Ambassador, observe the biomechanical structures the Shadow Plague has created. They're not just consuming these worlds, they're converting them into massive production facilities for new collective entities. Every day we delay, thousands of new biomechanical ships emerge from these hive worlds. The evidence was undeniable. The shadow plague had transformed beautiful garden worlds into grotesque factory organisms, their surfaces writhing with mechanical and biological components that produced new threats at an exponential rate. "Commence planetary sterilization," Chen ordered. "All targeted worlds. Complete destruction." What followed was the most comprehensive military action in galactic history. Human weapons reached into the hearts of infected worlds, triggering cascade reactions that reduced entire planets to lifeless rock. In 6 hours, humanity eliminated threats that would have taken the shadow plague decades to develop. "Admiral," the communications officer reported, "we're receiving transmission from shadow plague command clusters. They're attempting to surrender." Chen's response was immediate. "No surrender accepted. Continue operations until complete elimination is confirmed." Serenity felt compelled to speak. "Admiral, surely accepting surrender would demonstrate human mercy and prove to the galaxy that—" "Ambassador," Chen interrupted, "the shadow plague doesn't surrender in the way you understand it. They offer temporary cessation of hostilities, while they analyze our capabilities and develop countermeasures. They're a collective consciousness that views negotiation as another form of warfare." Dr. Webb provided supporting data. "Our xenobiological analysis indicates the shadow plague cannot truly surrender because it cannot truly die. As long as any component of the collective survives, the threat remains. Half measures guarantee future catastrophe." The final phase of the operation involved hunting down scattered shadow plague elements across 17 star systems. Human forces moved with mechanical precision, eliminating every biomechanical entity they encountered. No mercy, no exceptions, no survivors. "Last shadow plague facility destroyed," Torres reported 12 hours after the operation began. "Sensor sweeps confirm no remaining collective consciousness signatures in Luminous sector." The silence that followed was profound. In less than a day, humanity had accomplished what the entire Confederacy had failed to achieve in months of warfare. The shadow plague, a threat that had seemed unstoppable, had been completely eliminated. "Admiral," Serenity said quietly, "your people have saved the galaxy, but at what cost to the galaxy's soul?" Chen's expression softened slightly. "Ambassador, that's a question each species will have to answer for themselves. Humanity chose survival over philosophy, effectiveness over elegance, victory over moral comfort. We became what the galaxy needed us to become." Dr. Webb activated communication arrays showing responses from across Confederacy space. "We're receiving messages from 47 different worlds, Ambassador. They want to know how humanity achieved what their combined fleets could not." Serenity studied the incoming communications. Fear, gratitude, confusion, and hope mixed together in the transmissions from species that had been facing extinction just hours before. "What happens now?" she asked. Admiral Chen walked to the observation windows, looking out at the human fleet that had just proven itself the most powerful military force in the galaxy. "Now, Ambassador, the galaxy decides whether it wants protectors or whether it prefers the illusion of independence. And if the Confederacy chooses independence, then humanity returns to the shadows and waits for the next threat to emerge from dark space. Because there will be a next threat, Ambassador. The universe is not a peaceful place no matter how much civilized species wish it were." 3 weeks later, Ambassador Serenity stood before the Confederacy Council on the rebuilt capital world of New Harmony. Representatives from 200 species filled the Great Assembly Hall, all waiting to hear her report about humanity's intervention. "Honored representatives," she began, her crystalline voice carrying across the chamber, "I have witnessed the most effective military action in galactic history. In 18 hours, human forces eliminated a threat that our combined fleets could not defeat in months of warfare." Murmurs spread through the assembly. Some voices carried hope, others fear. "However," Serenity continued, "I must also report that human military doctrine operates by principles that challenge our fundamental beliefs about the nature of civilized society. They fight not to defeat enemies but to eliminate them completely. They choose decisive action over careful consideration. They embrace violence as a tool, rather than rejecting it as a moral failing. Chancellor Wisdom of the Ethereal Council stood to address her. Ambassador Serenity, in your assessment, do humans represent salvation or a new form of threat? Serenity was quiet for a long moment, considering everything she had seen and learned. Honorable Chancellor, humans represent the galaxy's conscience made manifest. They are what we might have become if we had chosen strength over peace, preparation over hope, harsh reality over comfortable illusion. And what do they want from the Confederacy? Nothing, Serenity replied, and the simplicity of that truth silenced the chamber. They want nothing from us except the opportunity to protect innocent life from threats we cannot handle ourselves. They offer their strength freely, asking only that we acknowledge what they have sacrificed to become our guardians. The vote, when it came, was unanimous. The Confederacy formally invited humanity to join galactic civilization, not as equals, but as protectors. The silent species that had withdrawn in rejection returned as the galaxy's shield against the darkness between stars. Admiral Chen's response to the invitation was brief. Humanity accepts the responsibility of protecting those who cannot protect themselves. We will stand watch in the dark so that others may live in the light. And in the depths of space, beyond the edge of charted territory, human sensors detected new movement, new threats stirring in the cosmic dark, drawn by the energy signatures of thriving civilizations. The silent watchers were no longer silent. They had work to do. The galaxy slept peacefully, protected by monsters who had chosen to be heroes, defended by warriors who asked for nothing except the chance to stand between innocence and annihilation. In the end, the Confederacy learned the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes the price of peace is the willingness to wage war. And sometimes the greatest gift a civilization can give is the strength to be more dangerous than its enemies. Humanity had given that gift to the galaxy. The only question now was whether the galaxy deserved such protectors and whether it could live with the knowledge of what protection truly cost. If you like this story, please like it and leave your feedback in the comments. Subscribe for more stories.